The first key concept is the threefold contemplations of the Dharma realm. So the Dharma realm is an essential term in the Avatamsaka Sutra, sometimes translated as the realm of reality, the realm of truth, the realm of the elements. The Dharma realm is the realm that embodies all of the different universes, and yet it merely stands on a speck of dust. Nagarjuna, the main thrust of his teaching is the middle way being emptiness. Dharma realm definitely relates to that, and maybe it's a Chinese cultural influence. The Avatamsaka, or at least the commentaries to the Avatamsaka, tends to try to put these doctrines in positive terms, meaning affirmative rather than negation. Nagarjuna was very good at negation. With these Avatamsaka patriarchs, what they try to do is try to put it in terms that were in the positivistic. Instead of emptiness, they would talk about wonderful existence. Translation definitely is a part of it, translating it so that it's palatable to the culture and to the language predominant. What they were trying to do was to develop Avatamsaka doctrine. Mm-hmm. So the discourse of the Avatamsaka school were new. They were different than some of the things that have already been said in India. The key concepts, for instance, that I'm mentioning here, the first one that we're looking at, the three contemplations on the Dharma realm, this is by Du Shun. So he developed it. Du Shun is a Chinese monk who's considered the founding patriarch of the Avatamsaka school. These contemplations are very much doctrinal, but they can also be meditative. So the contemplation that true emptiness is devoid of any attribute.
Whether or not emptiness itself is an attribute. Or any attributes, including it being an attribute.
What the Chinese patriarchs did with that was that instead of arguing that emptiness itself is an attribute, is to say that true emptiness, devoid of attributes, but with the turn of the hand, the flip side of that is multiple and multitudes of attributes, the wonder, the wondrousness. The second contemplation is phenomenon and noumenon. So phenomena being that all of the matters, all of the events, all of the thoughts and existence, these are phenomena, all the conditions that bring function together. But phenomena is plural, and noumenon is singular. At least that's the way I translate it. In this specific instance, we're referring to a very specific noumenon, and that being the absolute. The absolute, such as true suchness. It is just is. That is a noumenon that's in all phenomena, in the contemplation that they mutually interact with one another and a part of each other. Contemplation about universal integration. In one phenomenon, there is a singular noumenon. And in multiple phenomena, there is a single noumenon. So that noumenon integrates all universally. Throughout the Dharma realm, the noumenon actually connects everything together, all pervasive type of integration. The second key concept, the Fourfold Dharma realms. This one is by Chen Guan. He actually breaks it down in a little bit more detail. He gets more specific. First, he goes back to the basics, the Dharma realm of phenomena, which most people know of. It's part of kind of our regular day-to-day existence. And then the Dharma realm of noumenon, people understand there are multiple principles and that they're universal principles that actually apply. And sometimes he does use noumenon that way. It also comes from fusion use of the language of Li and Shi, which are Chinese phenomenon and noumenon. And sometimes they do refer to the more typical type of principles that we're talking about. Then later, when he applies them to the third and fourth Dharma realms, it's a very specific noumenon. The third one is the Dharma realm of non-obstruction between phenomenon and noumenon. Everything that he says must be experienced. This is not just abstract thinking, but it's to actually experience among all existence that there's interdependence, because we and everything in this realm is connected by this reality. And because of the experience of that connection, then we get to understand all of these concepts to be experiential, I would argue, because the Avatamsaka Sutra, it's not just about a scholar's discourse, although obviously Chen Guan and some of the others were more than qualified scholars. But what they really intended to do was for people who read and study this text to experience what the Avatamsaka is trying to explain. He's very much interested in us practicing. He definitely does it by example. That needs to be said about so-called concepts, because when we put it in terms in English, we can just leave them at that. These are just some abstraction. We analyze them and study them, and then that's it. But that's not the way they meant it. The Dharma realm of non-obstruction among phenomena, with the phenomena knowing that they are connected by one reality, that they actually impact one another and that they actually can morph into each other. That's why this is based on the emptiness of space, emptiness of time. When we talk about emptiness of time and the morphing of each other, the past, present, and future. The Buddha, when he spoke this sutra, for instance, he could be said at the time that he spoke it under the Bodhi tree, he's in the present moment and in the time that's present. But it's said that the sutra was actually happening in the future and other realms where he was also lecturing. And then at the same time, there are different universes with Buddhas who are also lecturing on the same material. It is said that the first lecture by the Buddha, according to the Mahayana tradition, is always the Avatamsaka Sutra. Put it in our terms, I guess the best way to think of it is that when we're dreaming, we're thinking that everything is happening and that this is happening right now. But in fact, it's just a dream, and then it's possible that we are actually dreaming right now. In order to get to how past and present and future can become each other, can be each other, we actually have to know that how time essentially is illusory. This is the sixfold interpenetration attributes. This is a way to capture what it means by phenomenon are non-obstructing, that they can be integrated, interconnected. Metaphors for this, the most famous one is where Patriarch Fazan used a gold lion statue to try to explain a lot of these attributes. When it talks about how phenomenon are, the table and this chair are actually one. Well, we're looking at separate objects. So how are they one? Generality part of it is, for instance, when we look at the material to this table, there's wood, they're made up of different parts. With this couch, there's also wood, fabric. When we're looking at their most elemental level, for instance, atoms, and actually clearly translate it as atoms, but they're dust particles in the sutra, a more literal translation of it. It's mentioned very frequently in the sutra. All matter and material existence is made of particles. In that sense, the general attribute is that they're all made up of just atoms. Particularity, it's quite specific that the atoms make up wood there, and the atoms make up, fabric there. The similarities are that they can actually combine to become yet another object. They become one substance, then makes them a similar object. Distinction is, even though they are part of one object, they have different functions. The different parts work differently. Some parts are shelf, some parts are leg. Because it became one thing, they became an entity. So that's the formation of their entity. And then destruction means that they disintegrate. Formation and destruction are about the use of the phenomenon. For instance, we're looking at object. Formation and destruction are the functions of them. When they come into being together, generality attributes are generally applied. So that's part of integration. So it applies to generality, similarity, and formation. Those are all integrated processes. And then dissemination are dispersing attributes. The tenfold mystical causal conditions, very much about the 6 attributes, but more expansive. And I like how Fazan explained it using the golden lion statue. So he's looking at the statue made of gold in the courtyard where he's trying to explain the 10 mystical causal conditions to the empress. First one is the gold and the lion come together. So then that makes them complete. Then the second one is that if we're looking at the eye or the ear of the lion, they're part of the lion. And so that's why the second one is the vast is the whole statue, and the narrow are the specific features of the lion statue. And yet they easily intersect because they're all part of the statue. Gold and the lion, how they contain each other. They actually are one and the many. There's one statue, but there are many features, or that there are many elemental particles. So they actually contain one another, and yet they are different. The fourth one, the mutual identity, looking at one piece of that lion, let's say the tail end of that lion, the gold that contains the entire lion. Mutual identity of all dharmas in freedom and use. The nose is actually the tongue of this lion statue. The nose is actually the mouth. The nose is actually the eyes of the lion. Why? Because it's all made of gold. If you look at the lion and there's only the lion and not the gold, then if you're looking at the statue, you don't see the gold, but you just see the lion. The lion's identity is revealed. But if you only see gold, then the gold's identity is revealed. So this is the fifth, depending on your perspective. So we can think of how we have the woman who's a hag and a young girl. Mm-hmm. Although they are part of the same picture, it just depends on which you have chosen to see. The sixth one is the establishment and intercontainment of the subtle and minute. Noumenon and phenomenon together and totally contain each other. For the gold and lion, whether it's gold or whether it's the lion, whichever identity you have chosen to see, they're part of each other. So like the picture of the young girl and the hag, whichever one someone sees first, both are actually there. And then the seventh is the door of the Dharma realm, like Indra's net. All the different parts of that statue is all a lion. I mean, without them, there cannot be a lion statue. So they're all part of that. And then the eighth one is that the lion statue representing our ignorance, whereas the gold, or actually we would say atoms, actually represent our true nature, our Buddha nature. One, the door of the different accomplishments. The lion is actually a conditioned dharma. As the lion statue is there, every single instant, the mass of atoms is changing. And so really it's a different lion from every instant to the next. But because we constantly think of it as the same lion, that is part of the process of being the same lion. Door of skillful accomplishment through the turning of the mind alone. The gold and the lion, whether we see them or not, whether there's one or many, neither one of them has a nature of their own. Whether the lion statue or even the atoms that make up the gold, they don't have their own inherent nature, meaning that inherent nature is empty. Even when we look at, for instance, quarks in atoms, it's emptiness that actually surrounds all of the quarks. These concepts that they try to develop is that they really try to get us not only to look at things in multiple ways, multiple perspectives, to really delve into the essence of these perspectives, having the understanding of these different perspectives and how we can apply these different perspectives in our lives, we would do things a little bit differently. So if I look at you and see that you're made up of atoms and every instant from now to the next moment, you're actually different, I may treat you very differently. Maybe I was upset at an earlier mass of molecules called poly, but then why? Next instant, that poly no longer existed. This is a buffet. Sometimes it's overwhelming. It's too much. We don't eat that much. sometimes it's useful just to take a piece of it that we wish to try and apply. It's know when to use some of this Dharma